Welcome to Leatherbrains, the podcast for fantasy football. Now, introducing your hosts, Hunter Slapdog Amaruso and Matthew Scotty Holtmeyer.
Yo, welcome in everybody to Leatherbrains. As always, your host Slapdog. And today is Wednesday, January 25th. We are joined by my oh so very good friend, Yeti. Welcome to the podcast.
Yo, happy hump day, Brainiac.
Damn straight. So for those who are listening as a podcast, it is Thursday, so we apologize. But for those listening live, welcome aboard. We made it to hump day, baby. Got a couple things we're going to talk about today, Yeti, and I think that this is going to be a pretty fun conversation for everybody, both our listeners and ourselves. We're going to talk about the AFC, NFC championship games coming up. We're not going to go into too much detail because I think we covered a lot of it on our last episode, but I was curious to get your opinions and thoughts on this. So we're going to briefly touch on that. And then we're going to talk about fantasy football, something that this podcast is a staple of, and we have kind of not been able to have those conversations because we've been so focused on other NFL conversations. So we're going to go over the top 10 quarterback ADP versus where these players actually landed at in fantasy, and just kind of give our thoughts as to why and some speculation there for fantasy purposes, and then maybe even some talk about the upcoming year given these players. So before we talk about the AFC NFC championship game, I want to say this. Alan, Scotty, if either of you are listening, I'm about to say something nice about Matt Rhule, baby. I'm about to do it.
Oh, here we
go.
go.
All in on the
clip it.
I'm all in on the fucking hype train.
Let's go, man.
Go Skurs. I'm here. So for those that don't know, we are all Nebraska born and bred and corn fed. And Matt Rhule is our head coach. I have been very we'll see what happens. I'm officially all on the hype train for Matt Rhule. He went and visited a bunch of local high schools in the area and has kind of introduced himself. And I thought that was so fucking cool. And I was, I have Bo Pelini, Coach
Scott
Riley,
Frost.
Scott Frost. None of these guys ever did that. He showed up. So, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I went and listened to Bussin' with the Boys podcast, in which they had Coach Rhule on there. I'm all in. I am all in on the hype for Matt Rhule. Let's do it. I'm here for it. So I just want to throw that out there. I've made a 180. I'm probably buying in too much, and things are going to spiral into sadness like they always do for the Huskers. But I'm in. Let's do it. Let's ride.
It's funny because, while Rhule was out recruiting and he has a top 25 recruiting class now, I was talking to a few of our friends and I was like, I'm trying not to buy into the fucking Kool-Aid again because I do it every year. Yeah, with Scott Frost, Riley, you try to get excited about off-season wins. We're like the Chargers of the college football ranking, we make these splashy off-season moves. We get the best recruits or top 25 recruits, and we just shit the bed every year. But with Rhule, it's complete. I feel like it's completely different.
It is.
It's not like college coaches they're just not set out for the NFL. Look at what Nick Saban did. Yeah. I think the only successful college coach has been Jim
Matt
Harbaugh.
Rhule's the new Nick Saban of college football?
Hey, I think it starts this fucking year. Huskers win the fucking Natty, and then we win the next 3 out of 10.
So here's our permission to all of our brainiacs out there. If you are not a Huskers fan, this is your last opportunity to get the fuck on this train because we about to rule it, baby. So ride Matt Rhule. I'm all in for it. Yeti, it's time. Let's talk about some NFL football. Let's get down to business.
Let's get down to business.
All right. NFC, AFC championship games.
Man, it's kind of bittersweet. We only have 3 NFL games left this year.
It's kind of a sad thing.
Yeah.
We talked about it all. I felt like off season of last year, I felt like it just happened. We were talking and we were hyping it up. We were so excited for the NFL season this year, and now it has come and is about to be gone. So
I feel like Russ just got traded to the Broncos, and we were so excited about that.
Chef himself. Yeah. So we got the Eagles 49ers, Yeti. Let's talk about this for just a moment. And I'm curious as to your thoughts and opinions on this because Eagles 49ers both have incredible defenses. Offenses might be a little bit different as far as caliber of play. Who do you got winning this game?
Yeah, so I have the Eagles winning this game 28-17. I threw that out in the Daddy Brains chat earlier. And I think the Eagles are clearly the best team in the NFL. I mean, Captain Obvious over here, right?
Mhm.
But when you compare the Eagles and the 49ers, both have elite defenses, both have, you know, I would say elite offensive lines and good offenses. Eagles have an elite offense versus a good offense. And I say that just because of Brock Purdy. You compare Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, it's not
You
even
can't
a
compare.
comparison,
No.
man. It's not even close. And I really think that the Eagles are the most complete team, the most complete defense that Brock Purdy has faced. I
Mhm.
kind of said it last week that I think Brock Purdy is really going to struggle versus the Cowboys because the Cowboys are the best defense he's faced his whole NFL
Career, yeah.
career. Like he had played easy defenses leading up to last week, and we kind of saw what had happened. Like he didn't make any mistakes, but some of those throws that he was making, he got bailed out on. Look at
Mhm.
the catches that Kittle had to fucking make.
Yep.
It's not like he did anything special, which is great. Like he's supposed to be a game manager, but I just think the Eagles, they're going to get after Brock Purdy, and the Eagles secondary is so much better than the Cowboys secondary too. Like he's not going to have those lanes like he did last week. So I think the Eagles are going to come out and just I don't want to say just smoke them, but I think they're going to go up early, like 14-0, and people are going to be like, uh-oh, like, we need
Sure.
Trey Lance is the obvious starter here. Like we're going to have those
Well,
types of conversations.
And
But
we're already having those conversations. I don't want to sugarcoat the fact that we're not going to have those conversations yet, because not only us as a Leather Brains team, but analysts in the NFL, NFL
Yep.
analysts and media are already grabbing the story and they're running with it. And it is very interesting because you have this young Mr. Irrelevant who comes in and is completely relevant for this team. I have stated before that this is a systematic offense, and for that
Mhm.
reason, you don't have to have a stellar quarterback in there to get the job done. You have to have a guy who mitigates his mistakes, and Purdy is doing very well at it. I don't want to discredit what he is doing, but Jimmy Garoppolo is not great. Jimmy Garoppolo is not a good
Mhm.
quarterback. And I'm curious to see your thoughts as soon as we wrap this up. Before we start our fantasy football conversation, I just want to pick your brain on some things here regarding the future of a couple quarterbacks. But Jimmy Garoppolo is not a good quarterback, but
Yep.
he's able to find success in this offense because of Kyle Shanahan and what Kyle Shanahan is able to do to help the quarterback mitigate the risk. And they have so many weapons elsewhere. So I agree with you, though. I think the Eagles take this one pretty handily. I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFL, and they deserve to be in the Super Bowl. And I think that's what we're going to see happen. So let's move on to the next game. The Bengals versus the Chiefs. You texted in our group chat, the Daddy Brains chat, right before we went live here, and you shocked the world. And by the world, I mean the couple people that are in that chat. So tell us what you told us.
So I just want to preface this by saying we are not a Chiefs podcast
Not a
by any
Chiefs
means.
podcast.
I swear I am a Raiders fan through and through. I swear it. It's on my fucking hoodie everywhere, like Raider decorations everywhere. But I have the Chiefs winning this game 24-21. What's interesting to me about this game is everybody in Vegas, everybody betting on this game is on Cincinnati. So Cincinnati, they were 3.5-point favorites at one point. Now that line is down to 1 in favor of Cincinnati, but it's getting closer to being a pick'em, meaning that Vegas thinks either team is going to win. Even though there's a 75% of the money or 70% of the money is on Kansas City, which is really, or not on Kansas City, 70% of the money is on Cincinnati. So you would think that the line should be higher. But even then, I include this, but it's not like the end all be all for my reasoning. I think everybody knows that the Chiefs are going to have to be in a shotgun most of the game because of Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
That's not a surprise to anybody. I know that Cincinnati's pass rush is elite. I know that they have a good defense. But look at Kansas City's offensive line. Last week against Jacksonville, they only allowed 4 pressures didn't give up any sacks, which is what they're going to have to do again this week because
was the offensive line playing with some heart because they knew Patrick Mahomes could not physically.
I mean, yeah,
take a sack.
like you have to figure that Mahomes is like, guys, like, come on, you're
Yeah,
going to
like-
have the game of your life. But like, if you look, the Chiefs probably had easily a top 5 offensive line all season. And they're up there with the Eagles as far as like, for like best offensive line in many regards. I think Pro Football Focus actually had the Chiefs offensive line as 4th on the season for whatever that's worth. But I just think the Chiefs, yes, they're going to have to do a lot of like short yardage shit. Everybody knows that, but I feel like they're going to try to control the game on the ground. I feel like they're going to have to run the ball.
Sure.
And I think they do that for 2 reasons. Obviously, Mahomes' ankle, but you obviously want to keep the ball out of Burrow's hands, man. Like he if you give him time, he's going to shred that defense apart. And so you limit his time of possessions. You limit the amount of series that you give Joe Burrow so he can't do that. I also think that the Chiefs' front 7 is going to get after Burrow.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to. I think the defense is going to be – they're going to make or break this game, obviously. Like, they need to get after Burrow. They need to get hurries. And it's also worth noting that last week they did a pretty good job shutting down Sunshine.
Oh, Sarah Jessica Parker.
And I think that confidence is going to lead into this week on they're going to have to limit the explosive plays, keep everything in front of them, and get after Burrow.
There is a tweet that just came out, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
I feel like this lends perfectly to the conversation that we're having. Old Shefty retweeted a tweet from a Chiefs beat reporter, and it's a video of Patrick Mahomes walking off the podium, not in a boot. He's not limping. He looks fine. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not trying to speak anything into existence. I have the Bengals winning this game.
Yeah.
I do. I've been vocal about that on last episode. I don't want to go into a shit ton of detail in regards to that because I already have. I think the Bengals are the better team. I think the Bengals have the better defense. I think the Bengals have a more stout offense with more weapons on it. The big difference maker in this game, as we all know, is going to be Patrick Mahomes. And for that reason, I think he is the league MVP this year. I think he should be the league MVP this year because what he's been able to do on a quote unquote lackluster offense. Because that's what he has been the offense. He has been the one that has been able to get this offense to where it's at now. So I have a lot of respect for Patrick Mahomes. I have a lot of respect for the fact that he is going to play this week, even though he does have a high ankle sprain. I can't imagine the pain that he is probably going to be in when he is playing on this. And last week you saw what he was doing while he was in pain and he was still getting the job done. It's going to be one for the books. This is going to be a very fun game, but I think that given the injury, that has been the sail that has pushed my ship over the edge for the Bengals to get the win on this one. So
I still think like a 70 to 60% Patrick Mahomes is better than majority of the league. Like I would say Patrick Mahomes on Sunday versus just about anybody else.
Yeah, and I think that the game script is going to be really fun to watch in this one because, like you mentioned, I think we're going to have to see some more run-centric offense, which is not typical for the Chiefs as of late. So I am interested to see what's going to happen. I think the running game is going to be different. I think short yardage game is going to be a little bit more of a focus because that's what they're going to have to do. They can't give Patrick Mahomes the world to run around and scramble. They need to get the ball out of his hands quickly. So I do expect that. Before we go on to talk about some fantasy football, I'm genuinely curious here. The Jets have, I want to talk about the Jets for just a moment. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but I do want to talk about the Jets. The Jets have, I've been constantly thinking about the Jets. Not a Jets fan. I could give a shit about the Jets.
Jets podcast?
Are we a Jets podcast? No. My question is there is so much speculation about the quarterback situation that is currently going on. I'm going to cover this in a couple episodes down the road here about the quarterback roulette that is going to ensue. The Jets have an opening at quarterback. There has been a lot of conversation about a lot of different quarterbacks and the possibility of them ending up in a Jets uniform. I think the Jets they're a quarterback away from making a deep playoff run. I'm going to say that because I think it's the truth. They have a good roster. They don't have a good quarterback. So all they need is a quarterback to be able to get the job for them. And then I'm kind of afraid of the Jets and what they're going to be able to do here in the upcoming few years, there's been murmurs of Derek Carr to the Jets. There's been murmurs of Jimmy G to the Jets. There's been Tom Brady. There's Aaron Rodgers.
I
There's
think just about every free agent quarterback is rumored.
Joe Namath has come out and said he would unretire number 12 if they got Aaron Rodgers. He would be okay with that. What quarterback makes, from a fantasy standpoint, what quarterback would you love to see going to the Jets the most? For the most, not just for fantasy production for that quarterback, but to upgrade and boost the entire offense for fantasy football purposes, which quarterback do you think would provide the best production?
So, as far as fantasy production, I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
I say that because immediately the quarterbacks that come ahead are the ones that you had mentioned, like Derek Carr, Tom Brady, obviously, Jimmy G, and then Aaron Rodgers. Those are the 4 quarterbacks that I could see, obviously landing there. Lamar Jackson he might be a free agent, but I just don't like him as far as what he would do from a fantasy perspective on that team.
Mm-hmm.
I say Aaron Rodgers because he's proven that he still has the deep ball. He can still chuck it 30, 40 yards in the air, no big deal. But we saw with Tom Brady this year that he's kind of lost a step in his throwing, and he's just not accurate anymore on his deep balls.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Aaron Rodgers would be a perfect game manager, but he would still make guys like Elijah Moore fantasy relevant. And I think Garrett Wilson would take the next step with him as a quarterback 1. Well, he also doesn't hurt Breece Hall's value at all.
True.
Which is one of the things that I would love about Aaron Rodgers going there.
Mm-hmm. My question being, though, would Aaron Rodgers in a lot of ways be walking into a similar situation from his perspective? Because, yes, the defense for the Jets is better than the Packers. I don't think that's a shock to say to anybody. But offensively, he's playing with a lot of young guys. And there's been a lot of media speculation about him not really connecting well with the talent that Green Bay had. He wasn't, working with them as that vet that needs to be kind of coaching them in a lot of ways. And for a quarterback, I think that's really, really important. You have to be on the same page, especially with your wide receivers, for timing and route running and all that kind of stuff. And the beat reporters and media were saying that wasn't being done. So does that change if he goes to the Jets? Because Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, those are all young guys, right? So you want to be on the same page with them. And if Wilson doesn't have that if Rodgers doesn't have that kind of respect for his wide receivers, does that influx anything for him walking into another situation where he won't succeed?
That's a good question. And I kind of wonder if he was acting like a dick to these younger guys out of spite of the Packers front office, because he repeatedly asked for help, on that offense, and they never give him any help. It's like we're going to draft your backup instead in the first round. They just never listen to him. And so I'm wondering if he's fuck these guys. I'm not going to help them. Let them figure it out. But that could also just be his personality. I don't fucking know. But obviously, you would hope if he goes to the Jets, he knows what he's walking into. And I've seen murmurs on Twitter of Nathaniel Hackett, so Broncos ex-coach / Packers OC. He's been rumored to go to the Jets. I think if he does land with New York, I think that's the first domino to fall, and I think Rodgers would be after, because him and Hackett are pretty good friends from what I've heard on the Pat McAfee podcast.
Would you like Aaron Rodgers to come to the Raiders as a Raiders fan?
I would like him over Tom Brady.
Okay.
I'll say that right now. Would I be excited about it? No, but I would like him more than Tom Brady.
Okay. Derek Carr. I don't think he should go to the Jets. I don't think he should. I'm throwing that out there in the void. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I don't think Derek Carr would be a good fit with the Jets. I really don't. Schematically, what they're doing, and I don't think I'm just gonna say I don't think Derek Carr is a wonderful quarterback. I don't think he is. What I see happening is Derek Carr, the Commanders, doing some stupid bullshit where they keep trying to find a quarterback in the offseason. and they're going to get Derek Carr, and I think they're still going to fail.
Yeah. So for Derek Carr to succeed in this league, what needs to happen is he needs a good offensive line in front of him. Like I'm talking like top 10 offensive line, because once he hears footsteps, that dude is a completely different quarterback. And I also think he needs a lot. he needs a lot of things to happen.
I think he's incrementally better than Jimmy G, but I don't. I have them in kind of like a same wheelhouse where I expect them to kind of just be like floating around on 1 or 2 year contracts as kind of filler quarterbacks. Like that's kind of the trajectory that I see. I don't see them taking either of them taking a team to any sort of victory. I think they're just kind of, in my mind, like filler type 1 year, 2 year contracts until we can figure out what the fuck we want to do for our future. That's how
exactly. Yeah.
And I don't
for
think
that reason, I could see him going to the Saints. I've seen that the whole entire NFC South is rumored to like Derek Carr too. So if the Saints,
the eye paint would kind of fit with it too. Like his eyes just like they look kind of sad all the time, and the Saints would, I think, be a good fit for like the way his eyes look.
Just complete sadness. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna pivot to some fantasy football conversation. So we haven't had this in a while. We got to dust off the old boots, so to speak. But let's talk about quarterbacks today, Yeti. Let's talk about the quarterbacks. We're going to talk about the top 10 quarterbacks of ADP in 2022. And we're going to talk about where they finished at and then who finished in their place. So I'll kick it off. We'll start with Josh Allen. Josh Allen was the number 1 quarterback off the board in fantasy football. And just for all of you, we're using Sleeper. If you're not using Sleeper, you need to be using Sleeper for fantasy football. And if you're not, you're making a mistake. So we are using all of the draft board from Sleeper here. Josh Allen, his average ADP was 2.10. So the last in a 10-man league, he was the last pick in the second round. He was a quarterback 1 off the board. You didn't get hurt with Josh Allen. He did not finish as the quarterback 1. He finished as the quarterback 2. On average, he put up 24.25 points as quarterback 2 on the year. You excited about that? I think I would be comfortable drafting him, and you're not pissed off that you got Josh Allen. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is kind of what everybody expected too. Like we didn't go into the season thinking, oh, Josh Allen's not going to be a top 5 quarterback just because of his, his rushing upside, obviously. But it's just like a matter of where you draft these guys. Mm-hmm. You draft him in the end of the second round, early third. You expect him to, put up the 24 points a game like he was doing. He didn't finish as quarterback 1, which I feel like the difference between that isn't as, big or like as concerning.
Sure.
But with Josh Allen going forward, I'm curious to see what the Bills are going to do on offense. I know you guys kind of touched on it on Monday's episode. But like a lot of people on Twitter are coming out and asking, like, how much help does Josh Allen really need? Like he has one of the best wide receivers in the game. Yeah, and he needs Brian Dable, right? But obviously, like they need to improve that offensive line. And then if they got him another weapon, like on the outside to go along with Diggs, like a solid wide receiver 2 option, I think, he's going to be in that easy, quarterback 1 in the offseason again.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what they do. And we kind of, like you mentioned, we touched on this a little bit last episode. What do you do to blame the Bills on the loss in this last game? Because you can't concretely sit there and point your fingers at, well, if this guy wouldn't have fucked this up, or this guy wouldn't have done this, or if like Josh Allen didn't play wonderful, but it's not like the Bills are going to move on from Josh Allen. Like he is a franchise quarterback, and that is what he is going to continue to be. And he's a talented quarterback. So what do you do? I think, like you mentioned, I think he does need help at wide receiver. I think they got out coached. And I said that last week, and I'm saying it again now, or last episode, and I'm saying it again now. They got out coached. And I think that is part of the problem. I think that they need to get their coaching staff figured out. I think that they need to give another weapon to Josh Allen, perhaps, as a wide receiver. And I think that's really the big qualms that I have with Josh Allen. Other than that, I would not have been upset drafting him at the end of the second round. Very obviously, you weren't either, because he still finished as a top 3 quarterback. He lost, though, Yeti. He did not get quarterback 1 on the year. That award goes to Patty Ice, Mr. Mahomes himself. He was a QB1 on the year for fantasy, but he was drafted as the quarterback too. So Allen went first overall quarterback and Patrick Mahomes went second. Patrick Mahomes' average ADP was 3.5. So middle of the third round is where Patty Ice was going. He averaged you 25.2 points per game. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how Patrick Mahomes in the offseason, there was a lot of concern. Tyreek Hill is no longer a Chief. You sign Juju, you sign MVS, you have all these different additions to this offense. There was a little bit of concern there, I think, for a lot of people as far as Patrick Mahomes and would he be able to still make the plays that he's doing with a lesser explosive personnel around him. Very obviously he was quarterback one.
Yeah. Everybody went into the offseason, like you said, like, what's this offense going to look like? It's obviously going to take a hit, right? No. Patrick Mahomes, he's the first quarterback in NFL history to throw over 4,000 passing yards and not have a single wide receiver over 1,000 receiving yards. Isn't that fucking nuts?
Well, and we said it though. Like, it is nuts. Don't get me wrong. It is absolutely insane. But we talked about that all off season. So if you weren't listening to us for fantasy last year, you want to be doing it this year, because we said this is going to be the year where Patrick Mahomes is, I think, going to have to not only improve as a quarterback, but he's going to have to spread the ball around, which in turn makes him kind of improve. So they go hand in hand. We saw that this year, and we said that. We said, I don't think there's going to be any concrete wide receiver that you can plug and play for fantasy purposes, and you're going to be happy with it. Aside from Travis Kelce, he's not a wide receiver, so you're fine.
Yeah. And with all these concerns, he still threw for over 5,000 fucking yards. That's insane. Like, yes, his like average depth of target was down quite a bit from when they had Tyreek Hill. He threw like on average 7 yards per attempt, rather. Yeah. So that's down quite a bit. That was to be expected without Tyreek in that offense. But yeah, 5,000 passing yards, 40 passing touchdowns. Like, it's crazy to think that he finished as a quarterback two with this offense over guys that have so much rushing upside. Like we're gonna talk about with Jalen Hurts. We're gonna talk about with like Justin Fields. Like, look at these guys and the weapons that they have. Patrick Mahomes has nobody.
No, and that's why he should be the MVP. We're not a Chiefs podcast. I don't care about the Chiefs, but Patrick Mahomes should be the MVP.
Yes,
like there's absolutely no reason that he should not win the MVP, because he is the most valuable player for his team, for that organization. If you took Patrick Mahomes out of there and you put Tua in, this team is a bottom third team.
Yes.
Period. So, all right, number 3, Justin Herbert. He was the 3rd overall quarterback drafted for fantasy football at 4.1, given his ADP. Justin Herbert did not finish even close to this. He actually finished outside the top 10. So if you drafted Justin Herbert, there's a chance that you could have just left him on the waiver wire, given where he finished at in 10-team leagues. He finished with 17.02 points per game. Not great for those expecting greatness out of Justin Herbert. I think the story here, I think there's a couple things we could discuss here, but I think one of the biggest ones is the health of not just Justin Herbert himself, but all of his weapons. The Chargers are an aging team. Keenan Allen is not getting any younger. I want to say he's 31 or 32. Mike Williams is 28. They both struggle to stay healthy. They have both struggled to stay healthy, and I think that really limited a lot of Herbert's production for fantasy as well as on the field for NFL.
Yeah, a combination of those injuries, but also Herbert's injury that he sustained pretty early on. Like that rib injury that him and Scotty, our producer, suffered at the same exact time. Yeah. Brutal injury. But there was like a 4-week stretch where Herbert just didn't look like himself, and he finally got the dust off and started to produce a little, but he didn't have any of those performances like he did last year where you're like, oh my God, Herbert might be the next, Mahomes, or he might be, the next Brady, whatever comparisons you wanted to make in the offseason. But it just goes to show you, like, he needs more help, which is sad to say because it feels like the Chargers are always trying to do something. But none of his guys were dominant this year, and they couldn't stay on the field, but they just weren't like killers out there. Yeah. Keenan Allen is he's your possession wide receiver. You give him the ball on those easy slant routes and, just let him kind of do what he does, but he doesn't scare anybody, I don't think. And then Mike Williams.
Let me ask you this question. Because I think this has been in my head for quite a while now. As a fantasy savant, like yourself, in a dynasty format, if you own Justin Herbert, would you 1-to-1 trade him for Trevor Lawrence and get Trevor Lawrence and trade away Justin Herbert?
Not 1-for-1. No.
Okay.
I
Is it close? Like if you threw like a late second round in there with Trevor to get Trevor Lawrence, like Trevor Lawrence and a 209 for Justin Herbert, would you do that if you owned Herbert?
That would be really frisky. That I would be very interested in that. Yeah. It's hard. Like, I guess both of these guys have had 1 year of like, whoa, like that was last year for Justin Herbert, where he was a top 10 quarterback, or I think he was like a top 5 fantasy quarterback last year. Mm-hmm. And Trevor Lawrence's breakout was obviously this year, but I want to see more with sunshine, I think, before
Here's my concern with Herbert. I understand that, but my concern with Herbert is not that he's not great, but that the Chargers are not great, and the Chargers are going to age out, so to speak. Both of their wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 are old, and they're struggling to stay healthy. Austin Eckler is getting old, and while he's still finding a hell of a lot of production, he's not getting any younger. He's eventually going to break. All good things do in the NFL. So, like, I would rather hedge my bet. I think I would take the Lawrence side of things, just because Herbert's going to have to go under a rebuild, and I don't know, that couldn't hurt his production for fantasy. Lawrence is under a rebuild currently, but I'm excited to see, like, I think he's higher or he's farther along in a rebuild process and could end up at kind of in an excellent position. So I'm interested to see what happens there, but Justin Herbert did not look healthy for a good stretch of this year. And then I think the story and the narrative here is that this whole team's really struggled to stay healthy.
And with the Chargers offense, so at least they have a solid offensive line. Like they did get hurt. Like guys were kind of in and out, but when they were on the field, that is one of the best offensive lines in the league. So they do have that going for them. And I believe they are all relatively young. But let me ask you this. What if the Chargers in the offseason, either this year or next year, let's say they get a splash wide receiver. I don't know who. Like if they make like an AJ Brown trade. Like I'm not saying they're going to get AJ Brown, but like one of those,
like maybe DJ Moore or something like that.
Yeah, like would that excite you even more about Herbert?
Yes, that would excite me a lot more. They would have to get like I don't want to say I'm middle-aged, but like kind of like an AJ Brown, where he's like he's not a rookie, he's 27, he's proven, and he is a top tier talent. If they did that, then yes, like I would be much more excited for Justin Herbert. They're just, but I think all around the board, there's just a lot of things that they're going to need to do to try and fix this offense in the coming years, and that is a concern for me. So they're going to have to make some moves. I'm not saying it's not impossible, and they very well could do it, and it could get me relight the fire in my chest for Justin Herbert. But where we currently sit, I do have concerns. I do have concerns. So the organization would have to do something there to get me excited. While we're talking about injury, let's talk about Lamar Jackson. He was the quarterback 4 off the board, ADP 4.10. So end of the 4th round, a lot of people were grabbing Lamar Jackson. It's turned out to be a pretty poor choice, to be honest with you, because before we move on here, I will say that Jalen Hurts, who we'll talk about here in just a little bit, he actually was the 3rd overall quarterback. So he was the person to take instead of Justin Herbert. So with Lamar Jackson, finished his quarterback 14. He finished with 20.26 points per game. The problem is he wasn't on the field a lot. He missed a good portion of the year, and that really helped tank his fantasy football production for you. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest question mark for Lamar, like I think everybody knows this story, right? Like he started off the season hot and then kind of fizzled out, and then he got hurt. Like it's tough because I was in the boat of Lamar Jackson. He's going to be healthy. He's going to have a contract year because he's trying to get paid. Like he's going to have a career year rather, because he's on a contract year. That sounds better. But he burned a lot of people in fantasy. And I think that obviously like those people are going to have trust issues now with Lamar Jackson, but
did he personally hurt you?
No, he did not hurt me, but I do want to say, ranked our quarterbacks before the season, and I had Lamar as my third quarterback, so I apologize to anybody who may have
Well, the
listened
rushing
to me there.
upside is tasty.
Oh,
right?
yeah, right. But this is now the second year where Lamar has gotten hurt and he's missed, a chunk of time. So now
over 27% of the games in the last 2 years, Lamar.
Yeah, he's kind of turning into the Christian McCaffrey of quarterback position. But the question at hand now is like, what do you do with Lamar Jackson? Where is he going to go? If he stays in Baltimore, does that excite you? Are you going to trust him, or would you rather him be on a different team?
I don't trust Lamar Jackson at all, to be honest with you. And I really haven't over the last couple of years. For fantasy purposes, the rushing upside is such a tasty nugget, right? And that's what makes him so productive. But as he gets older, my fears continue to grow with Lamar Jackson because, and I've said this before, last year was a really, really big test for me because in Lamar Jackson, I know that he could tell, and I knew that he knew I was really watching him.
He could feel your presence.
He could feel it. No, I think he could. He needed to prove to me that he could throw the dang ball.
Yep.
That was what he needed to prove to me last year. And I will say he did take a step in the right direction last year. He was, I thought he was doing a pretty good job moving the ball through the air. And for that, I was very, I don't want to say I was bought back in on Lamar, but I was like, all right, he might get this thing figured out. And then this year, that's what I wanted to see. The problem being is the Ravens traded Hollywood Brown to the Cardinals, and then they did nothing to get him another wide receiver. Rashad Bateman is supposed to be a wide receiver one, and I'm going to tell you right now, Yeti, he's not a wide receiver one. He's not a wide receiver one. Oh, and guess what? Yeah, he didn't play much this year because he also struggled to stay healthy. So they didn't have a lot of weapons in this offense for Lamar to throw to before Lamar got hurt and obviously was gone. So that's part of the problem. But Lamar Jackson, I didn't really get to see him throw the dang ball this year. Mm-hmm. So that's another problem for me. He is a rushing quarterback. And the shelf life for a rushing quarterback is a heck of a lot smaller than it is for somebody who is a traditional pocket passer. Now, you can have the best of both worlds. His name is Patrick Mahomes because Patrick Mahomes extends plays with his feet, but still gets the ball out of his hands. He doesn't take unnecessary hits. He does not lower his shoulder like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. He will slide. He will avoid contact. That's what you have to do. That is a gift. When you are able to move the ball with your feet, that is a gift. But if you don't protect yourself, the gift, it has a much shorter expiration date. So that's part of the problem for me with Lamar. Lamar, I'm if there was any place that I would get somewhat excited for Lamar Jackson, it would be the Falcons. I would love Lamar Jackson to go to the Falcons because they are a rushing team. They were a rushing team this last year. We saw it. We saw what Tyler Algier was doing. He looked great. Cordell Patterson last year, they were a rushing team. And part of it might just be because that's all they can do with their offense because they didn't have enough talent to get things done. They have a talented group there now. They have Drake London. They have Kyle Pitts. They are both big-bodied, huge guys. They just need somebody to get them the dang ball. And Lamar Jackson might be that guy for them.
And I think he really might thrive in that kind of offense.
I think he could.
That's like where he was in Baltimore, obviously. But they obviously didn't have any of those weapons that Atlanta has at this point. And Atlanta's young enough at this point, too. Like, their offensive line is decent, and they're still young because they're all pretty much draft picks at this point still. So I think that Lamar to Atlanta is going to pick up a lot of steam in the offseason if they can't make a deal in Baltimore.
I would rather Lamar go to the Falcons than go back to the Ravens.
Yeah.
That's my take. For fantasy outlook, that's what I would rather see happen. Now, whether it does or not, we're not GMs, we're not owners of franchises, and we are, but they're they're fantasy football franchises. They're not
and on Madden.
Deal. So in Madden.
But with Baltimore too, they fired their offensive coordinator. So if he does stay in Baltimore, what does that offense look like next 100%. Year? Is it going to be more pass approach? Like I think if you keep Lamar, it's got to be a more pass approach. But it'll just be interesting to have this conversation in the offseason when we know what kind of offense they're going to run.
Absolutely. And that's part of it for me is if they do take more of a pass approach, can Lamar Jackson get it done with his arm? And that's where he really hasn't cemented it in my mind to say, yep, he can do it. I have no concerns there because I do have concerns there as far as his throwing ability. So Lamar Jackson, he finished his quarterback 14 on the year. You could have left him on the waiver wire. Like I said, he struggled to stay healthy, and that's been a concern for Lamar the last 2 years. Like I said, he's missed over 27% of the games of the last 2 years. And I think a lot of franchises have a lot of concern there too when they're kind of like looking about wanting to get a deal done with him. I'm not going to say that's the end all be all, but I definitely, as a franchise, would be taking that into consideration. And like you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, Yeti, he has been somebody that he's representing himself. So he doesn't have an agent. He did not get a contract signed before he started this year. A lot of people, I think, thought he was going to come out and have a record year because he's working to get his next contract. Instead, he set out for like half the year because he's been injured. So I think his price point might not be where he wants it to be, or maybe where he feels as if he's deserving of, because we didn't see any football out of him this year like we wanted to. So Joe Burrow was the person to draft here. Yeti, he was quarterback 4 overall. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But Lamar Jackson did not get it done, large in part due to injury. There's a lot of quarterback injuries because this next person, Kyler Murray, K1, my quarterback for the Cardinals. He was drafted average ADP 6.1, so early 6th rounder. Kyler Murray finishes quarterback 19 on the year. What an abysmal start or game or whole season, really. I mean, he had 18.87 points per game was his average. There's a lot of story here. There's a lot to discuss right here. As a Cardinals fan, I was very excited for Kyler Murray going into this year because the offense looked like it was going to be unstoppable. Kyler Murray last year did really, really well. He is also one of those quarterbacks that he scrambles a lot. Now, I don't think he does maybe sometimes take hits when he shouldn't, but overall, I think he's also kind of understanding that while he can scramble and he's good at scrambling, don't take an unnecessary hit. You're 5'10", you're a small little dude. You're not 6'2", 240 Josh Allen. Slide, live another day. We need you. And Kyler Murray's got a good arm, right? So you got DeAndre Hopkins, you got Hollywood Brown newly signed, James Conner coming off of a record season with the Cardinals. He looked great. Rondale Moore, there's so many weapons on this offense. The problem being they all weren't on the field at the same time. Zach Ertz is another one. Zach Ertz got hurt. DeAndre Hopkins decided he wanted to do steroids. Hollywood Brown gets hurt for a little bit. So all of this happens. Not once did we ever get to see all of our starters on offense this year, and that was so heartbreaking to me. We still should have been better. This whole offense should have been better. Cliff Kingsbury is no longer the head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. Did not look great. The whole offense did not look great. And Kyler Murray, he didn't look great. Now, of course, as we all know, he suffered a torn ACL and probably won't be ready to start the season next year. So, Kyler Murray, lay it down. What are you thinking?
Man, it's hard to handle Kyler Murray going into next season, in my opinion, because he did suffer that ACL injury pretty late in the season, right? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at, a return probably, probably like week 4, week 5 might be like a realistic return date for him in his recovery. But I still have a lot of concerns with Kyler because, like you had mentioned, he is one of the best mobile quarterbacks in the NFL. And that's why you draft him where you draft him, because he uses his legs quite a bit. Yep. But coming off a torn ACL injury, it's like, do you trust Kyler Murray's arm to get you the fantasy production you need on a week-to-week basis?
Now, let me ask you this before, because you bring up his arm, and I understand the whole leg situation is very pertinent for fantasy purposes. In a vacuum, who has the better arm, Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson?
Probably Kyler. I would go Kyler.
I would agree with that. Now continue on. I was just curious. You brought up his arm, so
yeah, and obviously the health is going to be the number one question for Kyler. But like you had mentioned, also Cliff Kingsbury is gone. What is that offense going to look like? DeAndre Hopkins, he might be gone. What does that mean? Hollywood is going to be the wide receiver 1, but
yep.
Who else is going to be there? Zach Ertz is getting up there in age, and he's still a productive tight end. Don't get me wrong, but he tore his ACL as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
So he's out. That offense is going to look a lot different next year, and so I have my concerns big time with Kyler Murray. That his ADP is going to be relatively low. So he might be one of those, frisky buy low candidates.
Yeah.
But
yeah, his ADP is not going to be anywhere near 6.1 like it was last year. Like he's going to be a late round guy. And I think that's probably fair that he is a late round guy. There's a couple things as a Cardinals fan. I've been trying to scheme a lot of different things and figure it out. But bottom line is we need a head coach first. And that's You need to figure out your head coaching situation. We got the GM situation figured out. It's time to find a head coach and get that figured out so we as an organization can kind of figure out the next steps moving forward. I don't want DeAndre Hopkins to be on the team next year. I don't. Because I love DeAndre Hopkins. I do. I love him. He is a very talented wide receiver. If you love something, set it free, and this is what I'm doing. I want him to go find success. I want him to chase a ring, and he's not going to do it given the amount of time left in his career with the Cardinals. It's just not going to happen. So I want him to go be free, and we will take some picks out of that. We'll take something out of that to look towards the future, and I think that's kind of what we have to do here. So Geno Smith was the person that you should have drafted here, Yeti. He God. Was. I know it was crazy. We were all screaming it from the rooftops. Geno Smith. He should have been the guy that was drafted.
He didn't write us back.
He didn't write anybody back. He finished with an average of 18.52 points per game. I don't know. I did not put down where Geno's original ADP was at, but Kyler Murray, as I mentioned, finished as quarterback 19. Geno Smith. Yeah, that's where he was. I just don't know how far down he was. He should have been the guy to play. He was quarterback 5 on the year. Briefly, Geno Smith the starter next year for the Seahawks?
Yes, 100% yes.
Okay.
I think it just makes the most sense. And you can see how that offense all the guys in that offense, they backed Geno Smith in a big way. Like when they traded Russ, everybody was like, Geno's going to get the job. Like Geno is going to be the guy. And he was. I mean, he shocked the whole fucking world by finishing top 5 fantasy quarterback, obviously. But Jesus, man, like he's come out and said too that he wants to stay with the Seahawks, but he wants to get paid. So that's going to be an interesting talking point in the offseason too, is like, how much is he going to get paid?
Yeah.
You know, what does that number look like? Because that offense looked good with them.
They did. I think they need to figure out a couple little things, but overall, they looked very good. And I think I agree with you. I think Geno Smith will be the quarterback there next year, and his ADP definitely will be going up for next season. So number 6, Joe Burrow, Joey Ice, the man himself. His average ADP was 6.2, so early 6th rounder. He finished as a quarterback 4 overall with 21.7 points per game. I expect Joe Burrow to be right around quarterback 3, 4 next year. Like that's kind of like where my mentally I have him pegged at. Offensively, you know, they're still on a rookie deal with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I believe. Does he have one more year left? I have
one
to
more.
check that. Okay.
Yep.
So like for all intents and purposes, this offense probably won't look a whole hell of a lot different next year. They've still got a lot of weapons. They're still very talented. And I expect Joe Burrow to be able to get it done. The one thing for Joe Burrow that really kind of sucks is for fantasy purposes is that mobile upside. Joe Burrow is that traditional guy who sits in the pocket. He'll do his checkdowns very quickly and get the ball out of his hands. Joe Burrow doesn't scramble nearly as much as Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, those kind of guys. So that changes things. But overall, I think this upcoming year, Joe Burrow is still a pretty safe option.
Yeah, and I know we're not a Chiefs podcast, so I hate to even say this, but it just goes to show you how special Patrick Mahomes is, because Joe Burrow, he finished as a quarterback 4, but you look at his weapons compared to what Patrick Mahomes has, and you're like, holy shit, you know, you give Patrick Mahomes, Jamar Chase, or T. Higgins,
or both,
he might have like 6,000 passing yards, you know, like, but honestly, like, going in the offseason, we were all like, Joe Burrow, he's going to have a good year because of the offensive line. But little did we know the offensive line would so shit the bed. But that does not matter, apparently, for Joey Ice. Like, that dude, he's proven that, you know, even though he's a true pocket passer, he's going to have that weekly upside, or, you know, that top upside that you're looking for in a fantasy quarterback. And he actually finished as a quarterback 1 in 3 weeks, which I think is the most out of any quarterback. So salute to Joe Burrow, and looking forward to next year drafting him maybe in the 7th round. Hopefully, he's so cheap.
I don't know how cheap he's gonna be. I think his ADP is gonna go up, especially given like. Well, we'll talk about it. But the person that you should have drafted 6 overall is Mr. Justin Fields, who I think nobody saw. I didn't see this coming. I don't know if you have a mystical ball that you rubbed and saw it, but Justin Fields finished with 20.47 points per game. The dude came out of nowhere. I mean, he was a quarterback. We knew who he was. He was a quarterback for the Bears. The Bears are terrible. The Bears are so bad. And then all of a sudden, 4 weeks in, they find out after a year and some change that they have a rushing quarterback. And golly gee, did they unlock him.
To be fair, I did draft him in our league of record at the very end because I went with that Cole Kmet, Justin Fields stack, and I was excited about that. But I did end up dropping Justin Fields, and you picked him up, so you're welcome.
Thank you.
But my gosh, it was crazy to watch Justin Fields' season unfold because, like you had mentioned, the coaching staff was like, "Let's make him a pocket passer. He's going to throw the rock," and that wasn't working.
Chase Claypool.
Yeah, we'll get him Chase Claypool for a second rounder. Who the fuck would do that? But I think Justin Fields is going to be that Jalen Hurts type of guy next year. Jalen Hurts, he got drafted. Well, sorry, spoiler. He got drafted in the 6th, 7th round last year.
Yeah.
And I expect Justin Fields to kind of fill that void next year. I think we're going to see the same exact thing with Justin Fields, especially if they add weapons, even just one fucking wide receiver that we know, on a name basis, because he doesn't have anybody now.
D-Hop, maybe. D-Hop.
That would be spicy, but I don't know.
I don't see it happen. I don't
either, but they would have to maybe if they traded a first round pick for him,
maybe
Cardinals would be like, oh fuck yeah, but it wouldn't make sense.
No, I don't
for D-Hop to go there.
No, they're not ready for making a run for it yet. But Justin Fields definitely an exciting character. He broke the Michael Vick's rushing record for the single game rushing yards. He looked great when he was rushing the ball, and was kind of the same situation that I just spoke about with Lamar. The one gripe I have with Justin Fields is he's got to be able to throw the ball better. And I don't want to say it's all his fault. I think some of it, I will give him a fair share of the blame there. I think some of it might be coaching and some of it might be the talent surrounding Justin Fields, but he's got to be able to throw the ball. That's what he's got to be able to do, because otherwise his shelf life is not nearly as large as somebody like Joe Burrow. So congrats to Justin Fields, somebody that I think not a lot of people were necessarily interested in, but certainly probably, and we will do an award show here maybe after the Super Bowl, but he might be the waiver wire out of the year. So he did really, really well. You mentioned Jalen Hurts. He was quarterback 7 off the board. He was 7.1 was his average ADP, but he finished as the quarterback 3. We talked about this in the offseason last year. You were a big hype guy for Jalen Hurts, and you were 100% correct. So I think that lends some credence to what you were saying earlier. Jalen Hurts is going to be good, and he was, and he is exciting. Very obviously, he's making a run for the Super Bowl. We'll see what happens this upcoming week. But what really has done it for Jalen Hurts is the addition for AJ Brown was beautiful. That was a really, really great thing to see. He's running the ball. That hasn't changed. He was doing that last year. But what he's been and what has impressed me is his ability to move the ball down the field and throw the ball. And that's kind of like what I was saying earlier about Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts has taken that step forward in my eyes. And that's what I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I want to pat my own back for a second, because back in May, I wrote this. So I quote from Yeti. Says, I am very bullish on Jalen Hurts taking a huge step forward in the passing game this year behind a great offensive line and skilled receivers with the addition of AJ Brown. This should be the most explosive offense in the league.
You need to be listening to us. I think that lens
I'm clapping for myself.
If you're not listening to us in the offseason for fantasy football, you're making a mistake.
Yes. And obviously last year, Jalen Hurts, he finished as a top 10 quarterback too. Yeah. And we were saying, he's going to have touchdown regression on the ground game, which he did, but the dude still had 11 rushing touchdowns. And what's crazy to me, he had a record 45 red zone rushes. Jeez. 45 attempts. That's more than that. It's a record. It's more than Cam Newton or Mike Vick, when they were playing in their primes. He is just elite. Their favorite play whenever the Eagles would get like on the 1 or the 2 yard line, as they would do like a quarterback sneak, but they would have like the wide receivers and they would have a running back behind Jalen Hurts and like fucking push him forward.
93% of the time that worked for them.
Yep.
93% that worked for them. So that just he's a beast, man. He's a beast. I expect him to be one of the top quarterbacks off the board next year, and I think that there's no risk involved because you're getting a great offense around him and you're getting that rushing upside. Who you should have drafted at quarterback number 7? Yet he is Mr. Kirk Cousins. Kirk O'Banks, Mr. Ripped himself. Finished with 17.98 average points per game. Kirk Cousins probably went undrafted in a lot of leagues. Probably was sitting on the waiver wire for a lot of leagues. And I think he ultimately was kind of like one of those sneaky waiver wire ads because he wasn't flashy. He wasn't doing anything that made you say, hey, I want to go get this guy. But you started looking. This is kind of how I look at him. And I don't know if you agree with me, but he was one of those guys where you're looking at the quarterback that you drafted, maybe Kyler Murray, maybe Lamar Jackson. And you start looking and you're like, on a week-to-week basis, you're looking in the waiver wires, you see the quarterbacks that are available, and Kirk Cousins he's chilling there. And you're like, why is he a top ad? So you click it and you start looking at his games, and he's like, he finished with 19 points, he finished with 17, he finished with 20. And then you look at what you had and you're like 12, 18, 10. And I'm like, maybe I should grab this guy. And so you did, and you put him in, and you're like, and then it became a question, do I start Kirk Cousins or do I start so-and-so? And I think that was kind of the role that he found himself in this year for fantasy football players. I don't know if that's true, or maybe that's just me, but that's kind of how I viewed him this year. And he was pretty good, man. He was not a bad quarterback to own.
Yeah, especially as a waiver wire ad. Like, he was solid on the season, and I think he's going to remain one of those matchup guys because we saw him kind of fold under pressure a lot, like he has throughout his career. But when he gets those cupcake matchups, man, he's tearing defenses apart.
Yep. Well, it helps when you have somebody named Justin Jefferson.
He's pretty decent.
Making plays for you. Quarterback number 8. Oh, this is a little gross. The chef. Russell Wilson was his average ADP was 8.1, so he was the 8th overall quarterback. Finished as quarterback 16. So he is somebody you should have thrown into the waiver wire and not even looked back. He finished with 15.72 points per game. It took him over 10 weeks to throw 10. I think it was 10 touchdowns. However many bathrooms he has in his house, I want to say it was 10. It took him quite a while to get that done. Russell Wilson did not look very good. No. At all. And there's a camp. I don't want to go too much into detail about it because I think we've kind of touched on a lot of Russell Wilson in previous episodes. But for those who are just joining us, there's equal share of the blame. I think Nathaniel Hackett shares a part of that blame. I think Russell Wilson's play was not as great as very obviously anybody expected it to be. But I think I am in the camp that there is some optimism for Russell Wilson next year. Am I saying draft him in the 8th round? Absolutely not. But I'm saying I think this Broncos offense does look better this upcoming year than it did last year.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you can't get much worse than what we saw this year, right? Like, the dude threw 10 picks and he had 13 touchdowns. Yeah. First time in his career that he hasn't thrown more than 20 touchdown passes. So you have to think that in the offseason, like, they are fully committed to Russ. They have to be because they paid him a shit ton. Yeah. And I think knowing that, they go out and they get an offensive-minded coach. And I've seen Sean Payton's name rumored quite a bit there. I think he has a second interview coming up with the Broncos. So that would be interesting. But, man, that was, I think, one of our biggest misses. I know I personally had Russ in my top 10, man.
We all did. Yeah. And it did not work out at all. Who you should have drafted was Trevor Lawrence, who finished at quarterback 8 overall. Sarah Jessica Parker finished with 17.86 average points per game. We touched about on just a little bit earlier, but I'm excited for the Jags. And I think if you're a Jags fan, you have to be pretty excited going into next season because they did pretty damn well, and they blew my expectations out of the water. I did not expect greatness out of Trevor Lawrence, and he's starting to show flashes, right? You said this before, so I'm quoting you. But you said this is Trevor Lawrence's rookie year because you can't count what Urban Meyer did to destroy that franchise as Trevor Lawrence's rookie year. So this is really his rookie year. Let's see what he can continue to do, but he has certainly improved from last year to this year. They still need help at wide receiver. Zay Jones was probably his wide receiver 1, but Christian Kirk may have been paid as a wide receiver 1. They were both kind of in tandem. Travis Etienne looked great. I expect great things out of Trevor Lawrence next year, and if they can get some more pieces on this offense, it's going to be pretty fun.
You have to remember they have Calvin Ridley coming back too, man.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this offense is going to be pretty dang good. They might be one of those teams that I say they're going to make the biggest jump in the offseason, because Calvin Ridley is going to join this offense where we've seen Christian Kirk as a wide receiver 1. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that Christian Kirk is not meant to be a wide receiver 1. No. He got paid as such, but he is a wide receiver 2 on an offense. Like, if he's your wide receiver 1, you're kind of sad.
Yeah,
but
100%.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, quarterback 9 off the board at 8.2. He finished as quarterback 12, so he wasn't too far away from where he was drafted at. Probably one of those guys, kind of like Kirk Cousins, where on a week-to-week basis, you didn't know if you should start or not. He finished with 16.51 points per game on average. Daniel Jones was the guy you should have drafted here. So Yeti, I got to step away for just a moment. I'm going to let you give some analysis on that, and I will be right back. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
All right.
So Tom Brady, he scored 16.5 points per game. And my goodness, the Buccaneers offense took a huge step backwards, like Captain Obvious over here, right? But I think what isn't being talked about enough is the departure of Bruce Arians. I think he was a gel that held this offense together, and when he left, all hell kind of broke loose. Obviously, Tom Brady, he still had Mike Evans. He had Chris Godwin coming off a ACL tear, but nobody was really killing it for this offense. Nobody was setting themselves apart and being that complete dominating wide receiver for Tom Brady. And, that's an issue, right? Tom Brady, he turned into the check down king. That's what Scotty and Slaps and I, that's what we called him, because it seemed like every fucking time Tom Brady was going back to pass, it was going to be a 5-yard dump off to Lenny or even Rashad White. So I'm hoping, Tom Brady is going to be an interesting case, right? He's a free agent. The Bucs, they just cleaned their offense. They got rid of Byron Leftwich and a bunch of assistants. So it's like, what do you do? Is Tom Brady, is he going to stay with the Bucs? Is he going to go to the Raiders? Is he going to join the Jets? These are all conversations that we're going to have in the offseason, and it's going to be interesting. I, for one, see, it's hard. It's hard to talk about the situation, because I could see a world where he does stay with the Bucs, because if you stay with Tampa Bay, you're in the NFC South. Who else is in the NFC South? Oh, the Panthers, the Saints, the Falcons. You win that division, you're guaranteed a home game in the playoffs. What wouldn't excite Tom Brady about that? If Tom Brady were to join the Jets or the Raiders, he is instantly walking into a situation where it is that much more difficult to get into the playoffs.
It's the
AFC
Jets.
West.
It's
if he joined, but
it's
even then, man, you're gonna have to go up against Buffalo. You're gonna have to go up against Miami.
I know. But why join the Raiders? Because you're going to have to go up against Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. And
well, that's what I was saying. Like, it's hard to say where he's going to go, because I could see him staying with the Bucs, because his road to the playoffs is that much easier. You win the NFC South, you're guaranteed a home game, and then you avoid all the elite quarterbacks that are in the AFC. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, he's up there, right? So it's like, if I'm Tom Brady, I'm looking to stay in the NFC, because I want to avoid all those top young quarterbacks.
Going to the Colts. I'm just kidding. I don't see that happening. But it is going to be interesting. I apologize for stepping out there for a moment. But Daniel Jones, did we really talk about him a whole lot? Mr. Danny Dimes.
Nope, I haven't touched on him yet.
Perfect. Let's do it. Danny Dimes was the quarterback 9 that should have been drafted in lieu of Tom Brady. Danny Dimes finished with 18.38 average points per game. Yeti, I got to give you another pat on the back, my friend. Brian Dable. Brian Dable has
quarterback whisperer, man.
He is. He has. The man has a knack for unlocking his quarterbacks. If you don't know who Brian Dable is, very obviously he's the head coach for the Giants. Before he was the head coach for the Giants, he was the offensive coordinator for the Bills. And there's a lot to talk. There's a lot to really like. You could delve in and write a narrative here about how Daniel Jones versus Josh Allen and the turnovers that they have faced with and without Brian Dable. Daniel Jones did not look bad given a terrible offense. His offense was so bad. They had nobody. They had Saquon Barkley. That was it. They sold away Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs. Wan'Dale Robinson got injured. Like, they had no wide receiver help, and Daniel Jones, of all people, took that team to the playoffs. This quarterback was somebody that Giants fans were actively booing at games. And all of a sudden now they're cheering his name and buying his jersey. So, like, what a turnaround for Daniel Jones.
Yeah, you brought up the turnover battle with Josh Allen, and I think it's worth noting that Daniel Jones, he only threw 5 picks, which is a career low for him, and I think that has a lot to do with Brian Dable. He came in and made things easier for Daniel Jones by doing short passes, screens, like getting Barkley involved quite a bit. Like, I don't think anybody saw this coming for Daniel Jones.
No.
Like a top 10 performance.
Well, we did say in the offseason that he was the fastest person in the NFL.
Yeah, he's faster than Lamar, right?
Yeah.
And, Brian Dable did kind of unlock Daniel Jones's legs a little bit because he had over 700 rushing yards too.
Yeah.
I think he had the most rushing attempts as well of his entire career. So, yeah, he had 120 rushing attempts this year.
But that's what you got to do. I mean, you have to do that with him, given your offense and what you have to work with.
And if that dude keeps on bulking up like he fucking looked like he did versus the Vikings, man, watch out for him. He's
baby.
Like 6'5", like 260. My God, fuck that. I'm very excited about Daniel Jones, man. I think he's going to be I think his ADP is going to be around this range next year.
They would have to do and I'm sure they will, but they're going to have to do something to offensively. They're going to have to do something wide receiver wise. Like D-Hop. D-Hop would be really fun. I would if D-Hop went to the Giants, I would be a lot. I don't want to say all in on Daniel Jones, but I would be getting close to saying all in on Daniel Jones. Brian Dable's good, man. And he's proven it. And Daniel Jones was the 9th quarterback on the year. He was who you should have drafted instead of Tom Brady. Last person. I'm cheesing hard here. Dak Prescott was the 10th overall quarterback, ADP 9.2, so early 9th round. You're not breaking the bank to get Dak Prescott. You weren't. Dak Prescott, you shouldn't have broke the bank for. He finished as quarterback 18, so he probably could have been left on the waiver wire. He finished with, I did not put it on here. I apologize. He finished with less than 17 points per game.
He had 18 and a half fantasy points per game, but he only played in 11 games. That's why
that's where he fell. Yeah.
He had that injury that occurred pretty early, and then Cooper Rush came in and surprised everybody, and everybody said, let's play Cooper Rush. Why does
then there was that was a legitimate conversation. It was like, is Cooper Rush the future of the Cowboys franchise? That did not end well, but who you should have drafted? Jared Goff, the 10th overall quarterback. Jared Goff finished with 17.08 average points per game. Jared Goff for the Lions. Scotty, if you're listening out there, Dan Campbell got it done.
Just like we all expected, man.
Dude, I have been a huge lover of Dan Campbell for quite a while now. Scotty,
but obviously. Jared Goff?
But not Jared Goff.
We didn't expect this to occur with Jared Goff.
No, and I think there's a couple things here that I'd like to just converse about. Jared Goff with the Rams did not look great. He looked okay. Obviously the Lions, they traded Matt Stafford. They took Jared Goff in. I figured at most Jared Goff would just kind of be we'll use him until we figure out what we want to do in the future. Lions are going to the playoffs next year. Yes. The Lions are going to go to the playoffs next year. There's no way that they don't. They almost barely got in this year, and they have a bunch of first-round picks this year, and just like the draft capital they have in this upcoming year. The Lions are a scary team, and Jared Goff he looked good. He didn't look phenomenal. He didn't look like, a top 5 quarterback, but he was getting the job done. And I was actually pretty impressed to watch him in some of these games this year and what he was doing. There's a lot of talent on this Lions team, and I fully expect them to be in the playoffs next year. I'm not kidding about that. I do think that the Lions are a playoff contending team next year. And I think that Jared Goff is going to be their guy. Like, I don't think they have any reason to move away from him. I don't think they have any reason to like get super excited about him as a quarterback, but he's one of those guys where, and I don't want to sit there and compare Dan Campbell to Kyle Shanahan, but like, I think you want to mitigate your mistakes. And I think Jared Goff can be that guy for you. You don't need him to be incredible. You need him to get the job done. And I think Jared Goff will do that for him. So I don't know how you look at Jared Goff going into next season. He's probably kind of like a late round quarterback still for me, but maybe it's like a late round grab as a quarterback too is kind of where I see him at.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably going to get drafted around this range next year.
Yeah.
In that 10th round or so. And I would be excited. Nah, I don't know about excited.
Yeah,
I'd be okay. I'd be okay with Jared Goff there just because, like you said, they do have a lot of weapons and their offensive line is really good. Like Jared Goff, he did what he was supposed to this year, and that was be a game manager. And he just exceeded anybody's expectations and had full control of this offense. So I'm excited to see what this offense looks like with the healthy Jameson Williams next year.
That, I mean, we didn't really get to see him this year, to be completely honest. Like, even when he came back, wasn't much usability. Like, he, for fantasy or the Lions in general, he had a couple good plays that kind of helped them, but overall, he wasn't what anybody expected him to be. He was coming off of injury. I don't think they really had scripted him into their schemes much. I expect great things out of him next year. Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, both very good. And you look at this offense and it's like, what do they need? Like, because they have 2 first-round picks and they're like early to mid first-round picks this upcoming year. They fixed their defense up a little bit, and I think this team is a legitimate playoff contending team. So I am excited to see what they can do next year with Dan Campbell. Before we move on, and before we end this episode, I do just want to bring up just this one little tidbit of information, because I ran some numbers, I crunched some numbers. This year was the lowest year out of fantasy football production from the quarterback position since 2018. I don't think that necessarily would surprise anybody to say that, but this year, since 2018, has been the lowest production we have seen out of quarterbacks at the fantasy position. 2020 was the best year. It's in between there. You almost saw 23.55 points per game, but this was rough. This was not a great year for quarterbacks. Do you believe that this was an off year? Or do you believe that we might be starting to see a shift for quarterbacks? Because I know that this is murmurs. This is not anything that is like being screamed from the fantasy rooftops for forums and stuff like that. But there's some murmurs in there, and I'm curious as to pick your brain very quickly. Like, is this sign of the future to come? Is this an off year? Like, what are your initial thoughts here?
I think what we're seeing is kind of a passing of the torch, because you're seeing guys like traditional pocket passer guys like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. Those guys are kind of starting to fall off, right? And we're seeing the new generation start to take over. Mm-hmm. But it's also hard to have this conversation without noting the injuries that occurred this year.
Sure.
Because I feel like the average score would have been higher if guys like Lamar Jackson played a whole season, or Kyler Murray played a whole season. Even if Deshaun Watson, honestly, if he played the whole season, I think the scoring would be a little bit different. But to add to your point of this being the lowest year in the past 5 years from a fantasy perspective, this was also the fewest combined passing touchdowns since 2011. There were 744 passing touchdowns this year combined with all the quarterbacks, and that is the lowest since 2011, when there was 748 or 740 rather in 2011. So I think it'll get better.
I think it will. Hey, and the reason I say that, I apologize for cutting you off. You can go ahead and finish. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
No, I was going to say, I think what there's a couple things here that I think kind of in my mind, I don't have numbers in front of me. I'm just spitballing here, so I understand that. But I think some of what you said is true as far as the passing of the torch, and we're starting to see, some of these vet quarterbacks start to leave the game, and you have some of these newer guys coming in. But I also think that a lot changed this year for a lot, and we're going to see a lot of change this year. Don't get me wrong in the quarterback roulette that is about to ensue, but there was a lot of big name changes and a lot of schematic offensive changes. And for a lot of these people, the Dolphins, great example, you added Tyreek Hill. So that unlocks a whole different dimension to your offense. What it does for the Chiefs, now you have to change your entire offense because you lost the cheetah. So like you have to kind of restructure how you run things and do that. And that happened across the board. You get a new quarterback in. What are their talents? What can they do that the previous quarterback couldn't? So like we saw a lot of movement in the NFL from a lot of big name players, especially at the wide receiver level. I think we're going to see a lot of that again this year for quarterbacks, and some of the big name running backs will probably end up finding new homes. But I think that lends a part of it. And then, like you mentioned, I think a lot of the injuries definitely, a lot of quarterbacks that are considered good, like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. All those guys were struggling with injuries for a decent part of the year. They weren't playing 100%. They didn't get to finish out the year. Whatever the case is, like, yeah, that's definitely going to impact your production for fantasy numbers at that quarterback spot. So I think there's a pool of things is why that number might be as low as it was. I'm excited for next year. I think this may be kind of an outlier just given some of the situations that we've seen this year.
Yeah, and I think from a fantasy perspective, this was I feel like one of the worst fantasy years too, because we had scores that were low, like week in and week out. Every once in a while, that's to be expected, right? But it just felt like the median for PPR wise, like the median for points scored on a week-to-week basis was a lot lower.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of the NFL script writers. We're just testing to see like would the normal man be okay with lower scores, and it turns out we're not.
Does the viewership go down with less offense?
So yeah, that definitely the script writer thing maybe not, but like I think everything else
you're onto something.
Yeah, it might it might be onto something. It did suck though. We'll wrap this up here, but I will ask you one more question. It would appear to me that going wide receiver heavy in the beginning was the strategy this year. That is how you won in fantasy this year, is if you grabbed the big name wide receivers early. In years past, a lot of draft strategy, and I know we're going to talk about this before next season, but just very early, just kind of spitballing. Is that a strategy you see going into next season? Because you typically see in my strategy over years past has been you want to get your two running backs off the board right away. And then you start to kind of worry about some of those other things. Running backs didn't matter that much this year. I mean, they did, but they didn't. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, Josh Jacobs, great example. He finished as a top tier running back, and he was like a 4th, 5th round guy. So like you had some of that. John Taylor, somebody who went at the 101. You definitely did not feel that way when you, at the end of the year, looking back at your draft board. So do you think that maybe some of that is wide receivers, like wide receiver heavy could be the strategy going into next season?
I think so. We were seeing guys like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. These guys were consistently putting up at least 20 points a game, it seemed like. Whereas with running backs, we always talk about how volatile they are. Obviously Austin Eckler, dude is a freak and he's a touchdown scoring machine, so that helps. But I think when you can get that consistency out of guys like Justin Jefferson or even Devontae Adams, who went in the 2nd round, like he was putting up 20 points a game as well. When you can like double stack like that, 40 points on a week-to-week basis, you do that in a heartbeat, and then you fill in your running back position with whoever's left. Like we had guys like Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, just to name a couple that were getting drafted in the 5th round. Yeah, in that dead zone. Like you're going to have to take chances on guys like those, but it might pay off. And for some people, it paid off in a big way because you just got the running back, top 5 running back in the 5th round. So, I do think that is going to be a key topic that we talk about in the offseason. If we should start looking at wide receivers early instead of, I can get a wide receiver in the 3rd or 4th round, because I think that it's starting to change a little bit now that teams are throwing a little more too.
Sure. 100%. All right, that's it. I was just curious. Well, like I said, I'm sure we'll have more analytics and statistics to converse about that. I was just very premature conversation about it. So, is there anything else you'd like to talk about, or you want to get out of here?
No, man, we're good.
All right. For all of you who have made it through the whole episode, we do greatly appreciate it. And if you joined us live, do greatly appreciate it. I'm going to suggest this to those who want to tune into us live. I know sometimes it feels somewhat sporadic for us to go live. If you do this one thing, this will help change your life forever. So go follow us over on Twitter at Leatherbrains. And if you just turn on our notifications, it's very, very easy to do. There's a little bell in the top thing. If you click that, turn on our notifications. So whenever we do tweet, you will get dinged of it and it will show you, because we do go live. We go live on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. So if you're not a Twitter person, but you do want to join us live, you can go follow us on either YouTube or Twitch. And they will also ping you there whenever we go live. So that way you can jump in and join us and have some live conversation, because we do enjoy it. So that's my recommendation to you. We do appreciate all you brainiacs jumping in and joining us. And we will be back next week. So, Yeti, let's get out of here, baby. We are out.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leatherbrains. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and leaving a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app and YouTube, as well as following us at Leatherbrains on Twitter and Instagram. If you're looking for specific fantasy advice, including draft advice, trade insight, starts and sits, or even if you want our thoughts on your sports bets, please feel free to send us a DM on Twitter for an answer and a chance to have your question featured on a future episode. Again, thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back before you know it.